Hello, and thank you for coming today. My name is Ronan Sorensen. I am the founder and CEO of Intellectmap Corporation, which has now been in existence for a little over 16 years. We started out as an AI company, and the greatest use of our AI technology was in the field of cybersecurity. So we very quickly became an AI cybersecurity company. About a year or so before COVID, I wanted to move the company to the Metaverse and did so because I had people in the West Coast, people in the East Coast, and people around the world, and I wanted to get everybody into the same place, and the Metaverse allowed me to do that. Then when COVID hit, we decided to incorporate our Metaverse solution into our Guardian Angel service. Our Guardian Angel service is a set of technologies that help remote workers operate in a secure fashion. And it includes everything from cybersecurity awareness training to pen testing of remote locations to AI log detection, features for secure email, document signing, etc. And the Metaverse became a key component of that service because it allows people to also have the experience of working in a shared space. And I'd like to talk about the security implications of doing this, because there are, in fact, a lot of things that one has to think about, both from a security perspective as well as from a organizational perspective in moving to the Metaverse. But before I do that, I'd like to actually take you on a little tour. And the purpose of that is just to kind of give you a sense of what it's like to work and operate on the Metaverse. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to teleport over to that large building in front of me. Now, one of the things that I want to just explain is that that large building, we use that for grand meetings. It's got a lot of glass rooms, and it allows me to kind of see who's present in any given moment. But we actually work over on the other buildings in the distance. That's where we show up every day, and that's where we meet and socialize. And then we move to to the grand building, really for the purposes of meetings. To teleport, you essentially just click on a link, or you can just use a short key, which I'm going to do now. If you were to move your company to the Metaverse, imagine a situation where on a Monday morning you want to get everybody together and you go to this large building in front of me, which I'm walking into now, and you have all of the different departments of your company assemble from their offices, which are in other locations, but now you just want to kind of get everybody together to meet and greet and to just get a sense of what's going on. So for example, the first breakout session room here could be for my IT department, and this allows me to talk to the IT engineers and to speak to the head of IT, seeing what I can do to speed up the next release of our technologies so that we get things out faster. Then I could cut across the hall and maybe speak to our marketing department. We speak at conferences like we're doing now, and find out, if there's anything I can do to help with that. I could talk to HR about our recruiting, making sure that we're continuing to bring in a lot of people into the company. I could speak to the finance team about accounts receivables. I could speak to the sales department about our pipeline. And the most important group that I speak to is the Metaverse client managers, because they are essentially managing our clients who keep the lights on and keep us operational. And it's always important to know what people need and how we can make our systems better. I could also bring everyone to the amphitheater at the base of the building, and the sound in this area would be only for the attendees in this area. While if you were in the breakout rooms, you would only get the sound for that room. So this allows us to have easy communication among people in ways that the space that you're in determines what you're listening to. The screen at the top here can be any content that is displayed on the web. So right now I have it set to the to our corporate website, and people can zoom in on this to get a better look. And as I am navigating through the sites here, people will see me navigate, and we'll all be on the same page. So this is like a shared browsing experience for the purposes of giving status updates. Now, the way that we operate the metaverse is a little different to other companies in our space, and I think it's really because of our cybersecurity origins. We sort of take a view that data and privacy are sacred things, and in order for us to operate our services, we don't monetize that data. We don't upsell it to other vendors, or we're not trying to do anything like determine what you're interested in to service a advertising engine or anything like that. We've never, over the last 16 years, we've never had any monetization of data, nor do we have any vendor contracts to support the monetization of data. Our business model is really, we provide the metaverse, we provide our technologies, and then we provide consulting services, primarily in the area of the two areas of AI and cybersecurity. We have a lot of good resources on our campus, and one of the resources that we think is very important is our Cybersecurity Museum, as this essentially allows us to increase cybersecurity awareness training among our people, because they can go to the Cybersecurity Museum to visit it and to socialize there. So let me teleport over to the Cybersecurity Museum now. What you see before you is the Cybersecurity Museum on the Intellectmap Metaverse. We felt it was important to have this museum on our campus, since a key part of securing any environment is the education and training of the people who inhabit that environment. Its easy proximity to our offices encourages people to visit the museum during their lunch break or at a social gathering after work. It was our intention that people would enhance their cybersecurity awareness by learning from the lessons of the past. I will now bring you in to meet my colleague, Jake, who is the custodian of the museum. Now you'll see that little green vibration over my head. That's just a way to broadcast to everyone and to myself that I'm actually speaking out loud in the metaverse, and those in close to me will hear what I'm saying. Hi Jake, how are you?
Hi Ronan, I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you for agreeing to show our attendees here this cybersecurity museum. As you know, history teaches us that an effective cybersecurity framework requires a holistic approach built on, the principles of people, technology, and processes. And I would like to discuss with you how an effective cybersecurity on the metaverse will also have to be built on these three pillars. So maybe if you could just briefly tell us what we're going to look at today, and then we can proceed from there.
Certainly. So today we're going to look at 5 different exhibits based on 5 different historical technological advances that have largely influenced cybersecurity and its history. And to further your point about people's processes and technology, we're going to go into how basically, even before computers that were as strong and as secure as they are today, you can see how these methods of security kind of existed and were developed from them, and then how all those lessons we learned then can apply to the metaverse as well.
Great, I'm looking forward to it. So where are you going to take us to first?
All right, the first section we'll be looking at is on cryptography. So,
okay, lead
you
on.
can just follow me there.
Now, for cryptography, one of the things that I find is very important here is that it's the basis for most of the cryptocurrencies that will be at some point used throughout the metaverse. It's not going to replace, other currencies, but it'll be one of the currencies that are used. And while we're not focusing on cryptocurrencies today, it does underline the confidence people have in its security. I think, from the point of view of cryptography and the metaverse, a key thing will be that how you, with the ubiquitous metaverse, how it'll operate. We're going to find that encryption is going to be a huge requirement. If you just consider for a moment that a lot of the virtual worlds in the metaverse are going to be independently built, and this means you're going to need to travel to worlds that you didn't actually put together and you don't control, and that world is going to have to be aware of your presence. It's going to have to know what your avatar is. It's going to have to know any attachments that you brought with you. It's going to have to be able to access your inventory to operate, to allow you to operate effectively. And in the metaverse, this concept is generally considered a suitcase. Now, if you think about this in the physical realm, well, we carry suitcases with us every day when we go to meet people in their physical offices, and there are certain risks associated with a thing like a suitcase in the physical realm. The same thing is going to happen with the metaverse, because what's in your suitcase is going to have to be accessible by technologies that you don't have power over. So from that perspective, there will be things that you'll want to encrypt and to secure, because if they were intercepted or stolen, you would lose them in the same way as you would in the physical world. So what gives us the confidence that cryptography is going to be a key part of the metaverse, looking at this from an historical perspective?
Well, I would say that cryptography, as the study of making and breaking codes, we know that encryption has been with us for a really long time in human history. The oldest example I have up here in reference is the Caesar cipher, which was a method for basically encrypting coded military messages between Roman generals. The method for encryption then was far simpler than what we have today. Basically, it might take, say, a person half an hour or an hour by hand to solve a Caesar cipher, give or take a few minutes. But if you tried to sort of brute force your way to through any encryption method based on all the different algorithms such as AES or DS, it would take you billions of years. And so it's not really a reasonable method at all to say brute force it. But basically, though, cryptography in cybersecurity, cybersecurity entails making your encrypted messages just harder to decipher, and the technology is great nowadays, but it's not enough without the right peoples and processes, basically. As in, you have to make sure that the cryptography method you're going with, the protocol, for example, is strong enough for what you intend to encrypt. You want to make sure that people aren't, say, freely discussing the encryption methods that you or your organization are using. Basically, and also you want to make sure the endpoint is managed pretty well. But it's all of those elements together where you can see encryption basically at its strongest as far as it goes with cybersecurity.
Yes, but again, in terms of education with people, the protection of the decryption key is critical. Because if a person has the decryption key, no matter how strong your encryption algorithm is, your data can be accessed. But let's move on. What's the next section that we'd go to?
The next section will be on networks. So if you can follow me here.
Okay, now I think networks is a really important thing in the context of the metaverse, because unlike our situation in corporate physical offices, you have a number of limited networks that people are using, and therefore you can secure those limited number of networks. But in the context of the metaverse, most frequently people will be accessing the metaverse from home offices. And that means there needs to be processes in place to do vulnerability scanning of home networks, to be aware of how the Internet of Things in homes can compromise security. And this is, one of the things that Intellectmap focuses on in its Guardian Angel service, is really dealing with the home user and making sure that that is secure. But another point that I think is going to be critical is that with the whole concept of the metaverse, you're going to be teleporting across networks. And sometimes it's a bit like in the physical realm. You could find yourself in a dangerous neighborhood by just making a wrong turn, just going down that street and clicking on that teleport link. Now all of a sudden you're in a very dangerous area. Well, in the same way, when you teleport into another part of the metaverse, you don't really know what's going on in that network per se, unless you have processes in place to govern where you should go and where you shouldn't go. But over to you.
Okay. I mean, fundamentally, networks, they've been around for, say, several decades now, and they connect computers with each other for all sorts of purposes. They can either be like local networks within, say, a building, or they can be a part of the internet, which is globally. And from a cybersecurity perspective, I'd say the main concern about networks is that they allow the transmission of computer viruses. And basically, viruses can wreak all sorts of havoc. And I'm sure you've seen everywhere, basically, about companies suffering terribly from malware getting onto their system. But basically, though, then the role of the cybersecurity professional here is to make sure the right precautions are taking place, as in we have intrusion detection systems set up to monitor networks for any unusual activity, and also firewalls to filter in good traffic and, say, not so good traffic. And besides those technological elements, you'd also have to make sure that there's the right education in place for how, when people interact with networks, they know what they can do with them, what they should be doing on them, and basically also the technical know-how of how to interact with networks and their devices in the first place. So with all those elements in place correctly, you can definitely get a lot more out of networks than lose from them.
Yes, and I think the importance of education here is critical. Like today, for example, it's very common that people would access networks at coffee shops, or at a hotel, or at an airport, and they need to be made aware that the identification of that wireless network could say something like "this hotel high speed," and you may think, "Oh, I won't go with the regular hotel name. I'll go with the high speed hotel name." And then what actually turns out is that a high-speed version of the hotel is actually a rogue system that is not at all run by the hotel, but it's just broadcasting that it is. Also, if people don't do things like forget networks that they've connected to, their devices can automatically connect. And if a person impersonates a common network that people are using at a coffee shop, they could easily have a situation where now all of a sudden when people enter, they're connecting to their rogue network because they didn't forget it from the last instance. So again, education is going to be critical here. So where to next?
The next stop will be at email. So if you can just follow me this way.
Yes. Now, email, I think, is one of the most advantageous technologies to think about when one is thinking about the metaverse, because a lot of the security risk mitigation strategies that one uses for email would also work with the metaverse. Email is difficult to secure for many reasons. Its historical origins, but also just the behavioral way in which people use email. But no company can avoid using email. And in a similar way, companies will be compelled to use the metaverse when it becomes ubiquitous. But the good news is that moving security risks from the physical world into the digital world will be a net positive. So I think we need to always underline that there are physical risks. And when you move to the metaverse, you're actually eliminating those physical risks, but you still have risks in the metaverse. So if one considers, how we deal with this with email, the best way to deal with email is really education and having a robust information classification policy. Namely, that there's information one should not transmit using email. And this information should not also be put on the metaverse for a number of different reasons. For example, one needs to be careful about what is said in audio on the metaverse, since other avatars may be able to hear what you're saying if they're within close proximity. Like email can be intercepted and read in transit, so could communications like I am in the metaverse. There needs to be a lot of education around social engineering attacks. So, for example, in the most common social engineering attack would be spear phishing emails, where someone is pretending to be someone else. Well, in the metaverse, a person can impersonate an avatar. And you may think you're speaking to someone because they look exactly like how they looked last time, but in fact, it's a complete impersonation of an individual. So there's going to be necessity to have some way of identifying that this person really is who they say they are. So I think we can learn a lot from email. But again, let's go back to the history of email and some of the lessons that we've learned over the years.
Well, email, as you were saying, it's a valuable service for transmitting messages, and it's also often the first point of contact people have with each other over the internet. If you're, say, making an account to buy something on like a website or something, you would probably make an account first by saying your email address as well as a password. We've come a long way, actually, in how emails developed over the years. I think the first one was sent in 1971 over ARPANET, which was an internal military network, kind of like as a precursor to the internet. But I recently checked, and as of last year, around 333.2 billion emails would be sent per day. And they could be sent by people, they could be sent by bots. But long story short, emails are absolutely everywhere. And they're only even more everywhere based on how everyone has access to smartphones and technology. So, but yeah, as you had also said, with that, email kind of acts as another vector for attacking from a cybersecurity standpoint. There's phishing attempts where people can send you malicious links that you could click and you could compromise an entire network. But there's also sort of social engineering as well to try and get a foot in the door to then basically trick people into giving them data they wouldn't normally share. These attacks are very dangerous. Social engineering can cost businesses, I think, around $130,000 on average. And people fall for them more likely than you think. And so I would honestly say the technology, emails were never really designed for security at the forefront. It's still there, but I'd say just transmissibility is the most important part. You'd really have to rely more on educating people on what to click and what not to click. And of course, developing the right procedures for setting up people's email accounts and how they can use them in, say, a business setting.
Very good. Okay, so we've got two more to go. What's the next one?
The next topic will be on RFID, which is radio frequency identification technology.
Yeah, now this is one that I think is fascinating from the metaverse's perspective, because a lot of what was trying to be accomplished with this kind of technology will be far more effectively accomplished with on the metaverse, in that you will be able to monitor people's access to locations fairly easily. You'll be able to log that access. You'll be able to have automatic ejection by security orbs if a person isn't supposed to be where they've just teleported into. So it's going to be an interesting situation. One of the things that I feel very passionate about, and this is something which we try to always pay great attention to at Intellectmap, is the privacy issues here. Because there are a lot of privacy considerations when you are essentially being able to monitor how people move about in the metaverse. And I would just think that there needs to be clarity around ensuring that what is captured from a security perspective is confined only to a security perspective and not to a privacy infringement. So that is something which I think we need to pay an awful lot of attention to, because we all enjoy our privacy, and we should demand privacy. So that is something which I think is going to be critical. But back to the history of RFID.
Certainly. So RFID, long story short, is the technology that would be used in, say, door fobs or access keys to get into office buildings or college campuses and so on. And it's also used in contactless payments. So say if you use Apple Pay or Android Pay, you'll be using RFID technology. It dates back to World War II, but was technically first patented in 1983. RFID it's very interesting as sort of more of a physical layer of security, as in you can use it to, say, lock doors, lock fences. Well, basically it'd be the same sort of purpose of trying to limit people's physical access to buildings or locations, like, say, security cameras would. It's less like digital as other cybersecurity methods would look at. So basically more cybersecurity concerns would include the possibility of those RFID cards getting stolen, or the data getting basically intercepted by some, type of mechanism. And there's also RFID skimming, which is basically the method for stealing payment information from people's wallets using certain technology. So as basically was said in the other exhibits, the technology is good, but you really need to rely on the right policies for distributing RFID linked technology, making sure that it's stored and disposed of when necessary within an organization, and basically educating people on what to use it for, where to leave it, and where to not leave it exposed, and so on and so on.
Well, we're down to our last one. What is the next section?
So the last section is one that very well prepares for the metaverse, and that is the cloud, or cloud computing. So if you can follow me.
Yes. So the cloud is something that I think is extremely important in terms of education around security, because a lot of people assume the cloud is secure. But in actuality, the cloud can be compromised in a number of pretty scary ways. The risks of the cloud could be poorly implemented security measures by the cloud provider, which you can't control. So you've kind of given that over to another entity. Also, you're putting your information in a digital war zone, as there's enormous payoff to hackers in compromising many companies in just one exploit. Because if you've got thousands of companies on this cloud system, and you break into that cloud system, there's a huge incentive. While if it's distributed into each person's corporate environment, well, it's a lot more challenging to compromise 1,000 corporate environments than just one. So for that reason, I think one should always be attentive, again, to information classification. In other words, maybe there is data that shouldn't be on the cloud. And that's kind of an approach that at Intellectmap we sort of encourage our customers, that, yeah, we'll keep things on the cloud, but then let's also just keep things in an environment that's totally within your control. And another thing that can be done with this is end-to-end encryption can mitigate some of the risks of the cloud. But there's also a danger to the cloud that I think is, and I'm not going to mention any company names here, but you could have a situation where you have a rogue insider being compromised. Like, they could be blackmailed, they could be given a large incentive, a lot of data. So that kind of thing also needs to be factored in, that a single person, an administrator on a cloud-based system, could circumvent all of the security protections that are in place. But let's go back to the history of the cloud and the lessons that we've learned over these years.
All right. To put it shortly, the idea of cloud computing has existed for a very long time, actually around the 50s, but it's really only been achievable within the last 2 decades. Interestingly enough, 94% of business enterprises use cloud services in some form or fashion, just because the cloud is a very useful tool for setting up websites or email servers for your specific business. From a cybersecurity standpoint, it's very important for both the cloud provider and the cloud client to understand their permissions and how to access the cloud, their responsibilities for certain elements of it. Should there be any compromising, should any data breaches occur? That is the primary concern for any business that work on the cloud is a data breach attempt. And so I guess there is that there's that concern that the more you put on the cloud, the more you could be making more vulnerable. But security for clouds is usually pretty strong and top notch. But I would say all the lessons from that would also go on to the metaverse as well.
Yes, I think the metaverse will likely predominantly be running on cloud-based systems. But one of the things that I run into all the time with our clients is a lack of awareness of the shared responsibility matrix that cloud providers will discuss. In other words, people think that if they put their information on the cloud provider will look after it. But most cloud providers actually have a shared responsibility matrix where they say, well, we'll look after patching the servers and we'll look after making sure that physical access to these data centers is secure. But it's up to you to ensure that you've properly configured your own security and that you have put in place monitoring access in terms of logging and any possible intrusion detection system, because a person can always have an account that was compromised. So things also like making sure that the channels are encrypted, using virtual private networks to the cloud can help. So there's a lot of education that needs to occur there. Anyway, Jake, thank you so much for this tour. I really do think having a place like this is a great asset to our metaverse, because we're encouraging people to think about security in a deep way and to do it in an entertaining way. And just wanted again to thank you for all the work you've put in putting this together.
All right. Thank you for coming here today as well.
Thank you. Now we're going to teleport over to our dining area to have a roundtable discussion with Mark Danner about what we need to do to guard the metaverse. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Ronan. Greetings.
Let me just sit beside you here.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mark. Just for the benefit of our audience, I'd like to just introduce you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So prior to joining the Intellectmap team, Mark Danner has had decades of experience in operational security and cybersecurity. Mark worked for the CIA for 15 years, where he trained hundreds of people in operational security, and he was also an operative overseeing white hat and black hat operations in many different situations around the world. Mark went on then to work for the fourth largest bank in the world, training hundreds of people there also, and he set up the Red Team to simulate attacks against the financial sector. So thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
Yeah, thrilled.
So what are we going to talk about, Mark?
Well, let's look at the metaverse here. Let's look at how the metaverse is a fascinating new world, but faces some interesting and important challenges.
Okay, before we dive into the cybersecurity challenges of the metaverse, I think it would be helpful just to kind of look at why people are looking at the metaverse in the first place. In other words, what's the value add to companies and organizations today? And I've spoken to many, many people about this, and I think I have a pretty good sense of it. So let me just start by my comments, and then if you care to add something, that would be wonderful. So one of the key things is reduce costs. For example, with the metaverse, you don't have any long-term leases or commitments to maintain or operate large, expensive buildings. You get a huge cost reduction. And the sad thing is that today, many organizations are paying these costs, but there's nobody in the building. They're all working at home because of COVID. So that results in a loss of productivity and creativity because people are separated. They're not together. And with the metaverse, people are saying we'd get the reduced cost, but we'd also get those productivity and creativity gains because now people are actually working in the same place. The other thing that I find companies are paying attention to is that the metaverse allows them to employ from a much larger talent pool. They can essentially get people from anywhere in the world. And it's also a way for them to deal with this phenomenon called the Great Resignation. And the issue with the Great Resignation is that employees have been separated for about a year from their physical offices, and this has resulted in less face time with their managers, less face time with their coworkers, and it's kind of weakened their bond to their company in a human and an emotional way. And if people are pushed to come back into the physical environment, some people may decide just not to do so and resign. And why would they choose that? Well, they've enjoyed no commute for a year. They've also spent more time with their family, and maybe are just thinking of the family work-life balance, and maybe they're rethinking, where does work fit into my life if it means that I have to be away from my family all the time. Also, they can work from anywhere in the world right now, sometimes very beautiful locations, and sometimes in places where the rent is just an awful lot less expensive. So a push back to the big city and the headquarters can have a cost factor in terms of rent. And then there are people who will still have safety concerns because of COVID. But the thing about people who are working remotely is that they do want a solution to some of the problems that they're experiencing working remotely. If you're constantly isolated, you can develop mental health issues. You can get depressed. You can get a kind of a sense of being marooned in a location that's no longer at the heart of things. And I think the other factor is people are feeling a lack of agency in their career. In other words, if you're not walking the corridors of decision makers, well, maybe you don't really know if you're up for that promotion. You've got no kind of clue as to how people are perceiving you because you don't have all the visual signs that one would normally get, or just the casual conversation around the water cooler about how things are going. And there can be a sense of a lack of agency or a control over your career. And you could also be working really hard but feeling a little unnoticed because no one sees you at all when you're in your home location. But in the metaverse, they would see you. They'd know when you'd come in. They know if you're working late. They can see you participating with other people. And they can see you taking, positions of leadership among a social group. So I think the metaverse is a great win for both companies in terms of cost reduction and some of the other benefits I've discussed, and also for remote employees because they now feel that they're part of the organization again. I don't know, Mark, do you think I've missed anything there?
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm literally thinking how extraordinary it is that I walked over or teleported over from the office where the team is to sit on this veranda with you. And the effect of the graphics, how that works on the brain is way beyond just the audio. I know you're there. We're talking. We're physically, digitally, virtually, separate from the rest of the team. We're having our discussion here that we're sharing with others, and it's a very unique model that I eased right into, and I feel very comfortable with it, with, of course, some important caveats to how to live and operate in the metaverse.
So, Mark, what advice are you giving Intellectmap clients as they prepare to move to the metaverse from a security perspective?
Yeah, and that's my passion because, as you said earlier, I've worn the black hats. That means offensive operations, going against targets overseas, and also the white hat, which is more of an information assurance and defensive posture, really looking at not only the U.S. government, but corporations, and how we can better secure ourselves from threats. And so my mantra is really look at, analyze the enterprise, the entire people, processes, systems, facilities, and understand that the metaverse is just one part. It's one cog in that whole enterprise wheel, and that whole, like a fine Swiss watch that has a lot of different cogs that are turning, and the metaverse is just one of them. And I tell the clients that I work with, the metaverse has to be seen holistically. So let me give you an example, and that is the systems that we would look to target when I was at CIA, and we would look to defend when I was on Wall Street, were part of a larger picture. And we would test those vulnerabilities. We would analyze them very closely. We would run through all kinds of exercises, just as right now we're hearing the White House is asking electricity grid companies and banks to be running active exercises and testing their systems in case there is some real serious blowback from a Russian invasion of Ukraine, and Russian government comes at our systems and networks and critical infrastructure. So, this is, again, a chance for companies to go beyond just this wow factor. Like, look at all the benefits of the metaverse. And I just say, look, it comes in as part of a package. And that package of building blocks has really greatly expanded during this pandemic. And what I mean by that is the package has grown a lot bigger. A lot more blocks are part of that because of WFH, work from home. And work from home means the new vulnerabilities that have been introduced are now part and parcel of the IoT, the Internet of Things. What else is that worker connected to? We have to ask those questions. The enterprise may be very well defended in terms of its intrusion detection systems and firewalls, but now we've got all your workers at home, and those are exposing them to that WFH environment has a whole new threatscape coming at it. So the metaverse is fascinating. It offers new opportunities, as you described, but I want to look at the holistic system and how people are playing in that. For example, right now, Ronan, I've got you on a big screen in front of me. I've got a laptop next to me where I'm also working. So multiple systems, multiple connections, and I'm not sitting in a facility that has a secure network that has gates and guards. It's a different environment, so we have to look at the whole environment. Is my point when we're looking at integrating a metaverse into an enterprise and really testing, understanding the vulnerabilities, and really educating people to a new awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have a very strong passion about is ensuring that as we move to the metaverse, that we kind of do right by people in terms of their privacy. I am a father of 5 children, and one of the things that I worry about is what are companies collecting about us that could, at some point in the future, be used against us. And I think that there's obviously a very strong economic model that will view data as something that can be monetized. Personal data and information about interests or products you can buy. How important is it to consider a metaverse provider's business model when evaluating the privacy and security factors in moving into the digital world?
Right, and I'm pretty passionate about that issue, and you may wonder, well, why would somebody with the CIA background like mine, wouldn't I be more interested in, that there is less privacy out there, so big government, big data can collect it. Well, I've been on the inside. I've seen how vulnerable data is. It was my motivation when I came out into the private sector to really build up the defenses of the private sector, because there was so much vulnerability. So now the new pressure points, the new vulnerabilities are this vast world of big data that's being collected by big tech. And I feel very strongly that individuals as workers, individuals, working, in their companies, but also at home and play, and they are not aware. We're often not aware. We're not reading the details of privacy statements, and there is so much data being collected. I would add that my concern, Ronan, is also not just what is big tech doing with the data, and there's just enough stories about data breaches, of the data being stolen, etc. My concern is really that there are also governments out there that really want to get inside the data vendors that big tech is selling this data to. So there is a very large threatscape that's out there. And so for me, there is a very great benefit to having a metaverse that is collectively defended, that is really defined by, first of all, privacy and security, and not a monetized opportunity. So, let me ask the tough questions. For example, is the metaverse provider offering a proprietary solution? Is it a closed platform, a black box? So then, if that's the case, then what's their financial model? Because the proprietary solution means I get to basically have all the cameras on and collect that data about my clients. Sure, they say it's anonymized, but we've seen again and again that putting the pieces of the puzzle together, anonymity is just gone. I believe that a proprietary metaverse is ultimately going to be a treasure trove of personal data that can be collected, because that's what the metaverse is about. It's about where people are going to be working, and then they'll leave work and for lunch and go shopping. They'll go out and meet people, interact with colleagues and friends. It will be a vast new world, but so much of it can be operationalized for value. So I flip it around and then say, okay, well, then what's the option? And for me, I'm really interested in open source solutions.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Now,
yes. So go ahead.
But I do want to, I think, discuss. I'm going to talk about open source in a moment.
Sure.
But I do think that we have to think about the metaverse as in proximity to physical in terms of security, because there are concerns about the metaverse, but there are also concerns about a physical environment. And I think one of the sad things or misguided terms is virtual reality, because the metaverse is real. It's just a digital form of being real. But when you engage with people on the metaverse, those are real engagements. They happen to be in a digital form factor. So when you consider how moving from physical to digital can be a net positive in terms of security, I think it gives you a more even playing field. So, for example, if you are operating in unsafe environments, or I think one of your cases was NGOs who operate in countries that are have pretty insecure relationships with the governments that are there. Can you speak to a little bit how moving a company from the physical world into the digital world will shift risks requiring new mitigation strategies?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And this is especially true for any company, organization, academic organization, media, even international human rights organizations. Is we're talking about a new way of interacting with people and being much more able to understand your environment and being able to do things in that environment that previously, if you had to go that person physically, would take on a whole different dimension of risk. So, for example, at CIA, we understood that any operational act overseas required a deep understanding of the environment. We would use different protective methods. We would be able to understand the threat environment at a very, very detailed level. I don't need to have that kind of understanding, and trust me, even in the corporate world, I dealt a lot with corporate security, and whenever executives were traveling, we had to do a lot of assessment about the country. Why are they going there? How are they going to get to their meetings? Executive protection is a big deal. And so the metaverse changes that dynamic. There are things that you can do in the metaverse that are really really much more secure, and at the same time understanding that there are aspects of your own personal security in the metaverse that you need to be aware of. Again, if you hear me using the word awareness a lot of times, that's one of the parts that really is important for holistic understandings. So we could get into that. I mean, in the metaverse, for example, your avatar is your person, your digital persona, and there are certain artifacts attached to that avatar. You got inventories of animations. You have to be able to transport those much as you would, a shoulder bag with sensitive or personal or proprietary information, through the streets. So again, it's all about the new dynamics, understanding what the metaverse offers, and also some of the needs for enhancing your security within a holistic view.
And within that holistic view, are there professional services that you think are important that companies should be looking at?
Now, I've talked about this a lot in the context of this view that information security first and foremost starts with people, an understanding of who is the threat, what are their vulnerabilities. And I really believe that this is true for the newest hire to the CEO. It's true for contractors. So I'm looking at a company that is cutting edge in this regard if they are really engaging in, say, cybersecurity awareness training that's way beyond just the phishing exercises. I've talked with numerous people recently, say, what is your company doing? It's like, we got our little phishing tests, but I'm talking about empowering awareness, leveraging artificial intelligence to determine where exactly are people in their awareness? How can training be customized for them? Because again and again, we've seen not all threat actors are leveraging against people, but a whole lot of them are. And so I want to know where the enterprise stands also in terms of its network vulnerabilities. I want to know where people stand in terms of the work from home vulnerabilities. And the only way you can do that is by penetration testing or even modeling social engineering tests against people. I've had a lot of fun doing that in the past. And really, again, the new power of artificial intelligence to proactively identify, attempts to enter the enterprise, attempts to enter, home networks. And, you and I have done a bunch of technical security reviews and against some really big players. And I'm constantly amazed at the vulnerabilities that are uncovered there. Again, a proactive view that says, yeah, test me, push me to my limits, look under the hood and see what's there. And then, mitigating those threats and understanding how to mitigate them, not only, through, best-in-class technologies, training, but, there is the whole world of insurance as well. And I mean, for me, why I'm excited to be working with you, Ronan, is not only do I learn a lot just working and learning from you, but I also know that this holistic approach is encompassed inside our Guardian Angel services. And I mean, this is for me why a holistic approach is so critical, because if we just were saying, hey, come into our metaverse, but we didn't offer the other critical components, then I would not be satisfied that I'm bringing the knowledge and the experience from my world, my black hat world, my white hat world, into the metaverse. But I know I am able to deliver something now that is totally comprehensive and able to really secure data at rest, data in movement, build that level of awareness of people. And I see the change. I can measure the change, actually. I can actively measure the change in awareness.
Yes. But before I open it up for questions, I do want to speak a little bit about the open source side of this, because it was back in 2018 that I was working on a migration strategy to bring Intellectmap to the metaverse. And, I had people on the East Coast, West Coast, and around the world, and I wanted to get everyone together in the same place. So when I was looking at different options, there were some proprietary technologies that we could have embraced, but I decided to adopt the open source technologies for a number of reasons. First, it offers greater opportunity for risk mitigation. When you can look at the source code of an application, you can understand better, what the risks you're dealing with are and how to mitigate those risks. Now, sometimes there will be risk with open source. Just because of the way in which open source is developed, you can have situations where there's a gap between it, a vulnerability being fixed. But I'd have to say I have found the open source community to be a pretty good, response time to problems as they occur. But more importantly, you know what you're dealing with. So, for example, if there is something in the system that isn't good, that could be better, well, then you mitigate around that risk. With proprietary closed systems, in a rapidly evolving situation, you really just don't know, because things are changing so quickly and everybody's trying to innovate, and you don't know if there are certain vulnerabilities that have been introduced because of this push to be the best or the most realistic version, which I also, and we could have a separate conversation about this. I think it's not so much about realism, it's more about plausibility. That should be our target. We want plausible environments, not necessarily totally realistic environments. But the second reason, that I wanted to go with an open source solution is that it allows companies to run their own metaverse and to take greater control over their privacy. Because if we don't have these kinds of alternatives, we're pretty much going to have to go with a system that we can't control and that we won't have an opt-out option on. And I don't think that's a good thing. And the third thing I would say, I think that the metaverse, like the internet, is just too important to humanity to allow only a small number of companies to control it. Like, can you imagine if you had an internet that was largely big tech and you didn't have an opportunity to participate without going through those gatekeepers? Not only would it potentially impact, privacy and security, but it could even impact content. In other words, you could have some of these large organizations adopting various policies that would prohibit freedom of speech of some kind, or would essentially negatively impact groups that maybe they just weren't too happy with. And that, I think, is not good. That's just not good for humanity. I think what we need is for the people at large to take control of the metaverse, like they have done with the internet. And open source technologies allows small players and big players all to be in this environment, like the internet technologies do of today. But in any case, let me open it up to any questions from our attendees to see if there are particular things of concern. And I have a question here, and I think this one is probably best answered by you, Mark. Online security and privacy is a truly institutional problem right now, especially for organizations that operate on a global scale. If big tech controls the metaverse, how can these organizations or governments trust that their privacy and intellectual property is secure?
Yeah, I mean, again, the whole issue of trust is a central factor, and if it's going to be a highly proprietary solution, it's going to be also a very costly, expensive solution, customized. There's a huge value to a decentralized metaverse, a decentralized approach that allows a community of actors to proactively explore security, to identify vulnerabilities, to mitigate those vulnerabilities. So to my mind, trust can be more reinforced in a centralized environment, proprietary environment.
Okay. I also think that to ensure privacy, we're going to need open standards for integrating decentralized metaverses so independent organizations can take greater control of their virtual presence. And this requires adopting and promoting, federation architectures and protocols that support the seamless transfer of user agents and assets between different virtual environments, which have to be independent, or which can be independently created. The hypergrid protocol, developed by Diva Canto in 2008, is an early example of this. A more secure version of the hypergrid protocol was released in later years, and today it can be an effective starting point with the right mitigation strategies. These protocols will have to continue to evolve to become more secure over time. But I think we need to kind of galvanize around open source protocols that allow us to seamlessly transfer between one metaverse and another.
Yes.
Another question here. The metaverse is a rapidly evolving set of technologies. For individual users, can your data and privacy actually be secure in a metaverse that's controlled by big tech? I'll let you take that one, Mark.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, it's a question of what else is being bolted into your metaverse. What are the apps, the programs, the methods? And so, for example, one of the things I look at when I come into a company is and do a technical security review is, how are you classifying your information? How are you distinguishing what is sensitive, proprietary, access controls? And the same holds for the metaverse. I mean, if there is going to be a really robust and resilient way to operate and do business in the metaverse, there has to be a methodology and an approach for information classification, and also for different levels of communication. For example, in the intelligence community, there are many different levels of securing places and securing communications. There are secure compartmented information facilities, SCIFs. You can have that in the metaverse. You can value that there is a part of the metaverse that is controlled, access controlled by you. There are secure telephones, same thing, that those can be, secure ways of communicating, but those have to be deliberately implemented, acquired, tested, and realize that that is your ability to enhance your technical security, and it is your duty, your responsibility to do it. I mean, it's a little like going out to buy a car these days. I mean, you in the metaverse, your car is not going to come equipped with airbags and seat belts. You've got to actively, proactively go out and search for that next level of security.
Okay, and would you feel that our metaverse at Intellectmap, we've adopted that same strategy?
We're using it. We're using it ourselves. Others are using it. We've seen how effective it is. I'll be honest with you, though. There is a level of effort that has to happen. People have to, and organizations and enterprises, through risk awareness, come to realize that, data can be stored, but it has to be stored in a secure portal. There can be ways to transmit information that is highly secure. Is it as easy as just sending it by email? No, it's not. But look at the cost of a data breach today. So again, my work in educating clients to new awareness is that these what I call incremental improvements in the security posture, they actually cause exponential negative impacts to the attacker. They are an addition to the security layers, and I think it's a critical addition. And so when we look at what we're doing, Ronan, we've done it for years. Whether it's the securing the portal, information classification systems, secure email. Those are incremental improvements that I find extraordinary and positive.
Yes. But I think a strategy that we've done, which I think is the right strategy for now, is that we're using technologies for that type of communication. Intellect Manager, I'm thinking of in particular, that aren't built on metaverse technologies. They're built on technologies that have been tried and tested to be robust and secure. And I think we're going to have a need to continue to operate with that mindset. In other words, there will be metaverse technologies that will be more or less secure depending on the technology you're discussing about, but the communication of certain data shouldn't happen there. It should happen in what our system is, Intellect Manager. That's where we will put our more secure communications, a bit like the SCIF you were referring to in the CIA. And I think that's a strategy that I think is probably the right strategy for at least the next few years while we've got a lot of rapid innovation going on. And then, things may mature and settle further down the road. But for now, I don't think we should be using the metaverse as our secure communication mechanism. So I do want to have a third question here, and I know we're running a little out of time. So for those who want an open metaverse or are opposed to big tech's total control, what can they do to help smaller companies like Intellectmap succeed? And I love this question because I have really two ways that people can help. One would be to allow us to bring your company to the metaverse. And on our website, there is a link for a free consultation if anyone wants to do that. But I'm even more excited that people would come and join our team. Like if a person knows of a company that could move to the metaverse and they want to be their client manager at Intellectmap, well, we would be delighted to speak with them. And in fact, if people go to our careers page, there's a job posting on our website where you can apply to be a Metaverse client manager, because we're going to need a lot of people to move these clients forward into this new digital world. And I think it's a very exciting adventure. So I'd be very happy if there are people out there who want to get in and help move this whole industry forward and be part of a new career for them to take their work to the metaverse. But let me just see. I don't know if we have any more questions. Well, I think that's all the questions we have time for today. Just want to thank you again, Mark, for joining us. This was a fascinating discussion on guarding the metaverse. One of many, I hope, and I hope we get the opportunity to further this discussion at another conference at a later date. But thank you again.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Ronan. Thanks, and ready to head back to my office.
Thank you, Mark. Bye now.
Take care.